plenty of TAAC members here. Thank you all. Let's go ahead and get it's June, right? The June installment of the Transportation Accessibility Advisory Committee rolling. I'd like to start with introductions from committee members and basically everybody up here, support staff as well. Doug, you want to take it away?
Sure. Doug Cook, Metro Transit Liaison.
Claudia Fugly, MNCCD.
Heidi Meyer, Minnesota CCD.
Patsy Murphy, Precinct C.
Andy Streisick, Metro Mobility.
Trevor Turner, Minnesota Council on Disability.
My name is David Fenley. I am the chair of TAAC.
Daryl Paulson, the vice chair of TAAC.
Allison Edmond.
Patty Thorson, Trellis.
Diane Graham-Raff, Trellis.
Eric Henderson, Minnesota Council on Disability.
Carrie Sheldon, Precinct G.
Fantastic. Thank you all very much. I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda. I have no changes to it, but I would also entertain any changes to it if folks
Do we want
so
to do
desire.
the introductions for
Oh,
online?
we have Ken on. Yes, Ken, would you like to introduce yourself? And thank you for.
Sure, Ken Rogers, District D.
Awesome, thank you. Sorry about that, Ken.
Yep.
I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
Who else do we have?
It looks like,
Is that Guthrie?
no, that's support staff.
Well, that's the. Who moved? That's the I-buy or whatever.
Did somebody move? Sorry, okay, thank you. Patsy, is there a second?
I'll second.
Eric seconds. All in favor? Yes. Opposed? No. You can just all say it at once.
Yes.
One of the nice things about not doing things online anymore is we don't have to do roll call votes, so you can all just call it out. Opposed? No. Awesome. Thank you all very much. I would also entertain a motion to approve the minutes from May.
So moved.
You?
Also approve.
All right. We'll go with Claudia to second. All in favor? Yes.
Yes.
Opposed, no. Abstain, thank you very much. That passes. Let's just dive right in. We kind of have a treat this month, this year, even probably this decade. We
hope to make it a regular occurrence, so.
We're lucky enough to have folks from, I know that you're not technically Metropolitan Council employees, but there is or Metro Transit employees, but there is a close collaboration between Metro Transit and the State Fair. Folks obviously need to get to the State Fair. There's not unlimited parking. And we do know that folks with disabilities love to go to the State Fair, and folks with disabilities use public transit to get to the State Fair. So we have the State Fair perspective here for, I think, is maybe the first time. Really? So welcome, Renee and Christine. I'm guessing Mike is in the background, just in case you
Mike,
need
come
them.
up to the table too. I didn't know.
Well, I think we'll do Christine and I will start, and then we'll pass it off to Hagen and Mike to cover some more things.
There you go.
Okay.
Sorry, I didn't know you guys had a system.
We've got a plan.
We
We rehearsed this extensively.
Good.
So thank you so much for having us. My name is Renee Alexander, and I am the new CEO of the Minnesota State Fair. I've started week 3. So, but although I'm new to the role, I have been with the fair for over 20 years. The last 18 years I've been in leadership, overseeing multiple departments, including booking of the grandstand entertainment. So it's humbling to take on this role. The fair means so much to so many, and I'm really committed to making sure we keep the traditions of the fair and really celebrate all that is great about our state, but also improving on the operations we have and taking innovation into account as well. So accessibility is certainly something that is a priority for us throughout our campus and getting people to the fair. About 50% of our guests arrive to the fair via some sort of transit. So today we'll talk a little bit about the different varieties. I think there's just some just an understanding of the different ways that people can actually arrive to the fair. So I'll do some introductions, and then I will hand it off to Chris and to Mike and Hagen. So Christine Noonan is here with me. She's our marketing director, and she's also the chair of our accessibility committee that we have at the fair. So it's something, again, that we're very committed to. So Chris works with our full-time staff, with members of them throughout different departments to work on our accessibility initiatives. So I will turn it over to Chris.
Great, thank you. Good morning. As Renee mentioned, part of my year-round full-time responsibility is guest services, and a large chunk of that is making sure that any guest feels welcome and included in all that we do at the State Fair, and of course, transportation is a huge, huge part of that. Accessibility, as you know, is a journey. It's not an end goal, so we are working diligently and persistently on trying to improve all aspects of our operation as it relates to accessibility. So we're here actually, obviously to talk about transportation. So as Renee mentioned, a large chunk of our guests come to the fair via mass transit. So there's really 4 different bus services that feed the State Fair. The first system, of course, is the regular Metro Transit bus routes. The primary routes that we highlight from the fair's perspective are route number 3 and the A line. And then we also, of course, direct people to take the green line and then hop on the A line in order to access the fair. The second system is what we call our express bus system. And those providers are Metro Transit, Southwest Transit, and Minnesota Valley Transit Authority. The third system is the State Fair Park and Ride system, and Lorenz Bus Service is the provider of this service. And then the fourth is Metro Mobility. And at this point, I will turn it over to Hagen and Mike because they are the operations key to making those 4 bus services as well as some other options accessible and improved every year.
How you guys doing?
Pretty good. How about yourselves?
Doing all right.
Yeah. Thank you for being here.
Oh yeah. So where would you like to start? When it comes to ADA accessibility, with our parking on the grounds, we have 2 areas that are really, the size of them. It's pretty big. I mean, we have.
So we have, it's actually, there's 3 large areas. So we have 3 large parking areas, which total about 5,500 parking spaces. In addition to those 5,500 parking spaces, we have over 800 ADA spots available. But like we mentioned before, parking is just one small way to get to the fair. The transit is a huge part of that. And so, we have a couple of options for transit that really allow people to get to the fair easily. We have 28 park and ride locations throughout the area surrounding the fairgrounds that are closer in. And then as Christine mentioned, we have these express bus locations that are a little bit further out. Of those 28 locations that we do for our free park and ride service, one of them is dedicated entirely to ADA. That's our Oscar Johnson Arena location. You are required to have an ADA sticker or plate or something like that to park there. And that drops off at our Gate 9, our Loop Gate, which is one of the 2 locations that Metro Mobility also drops at. That lot services, like I said, the ADA needs. So our other parking lot locations, let me just say this, some of them have ADA availability, but not guaranteed to. Hagen can speak more to that because he actually kind of oversees our parking lot a little bit. But this lot that we have for Oscar Johnson Arena is just dedicated to that solely. So it's a really used, it's used constantly. And again, I'll kind of turn it over to you to kind of speak more to that.
That is by far one of our busiest lots, just so you guys are aware. All of our parking rides are ADA accessible. Lorenz has provided a scheduled bus on each route. So in every route that we have, there's always an ADA accessible bus on that route. So if someone doesn't make it to Oscar Johnson, they don't have to worry about if they go to a different parking ride, they still have accessibility to get to the fair. We also have it to the point where if someone shows up, the bus just left, our guys have the capability of making a phone call or talking over the radio, talking directly to Lorenz and getting one to come back. It might take 10, 15 minutes because one just left, but they'll have one input into the system to get there just for that person who just came. And then Lorenz, you know, talking with those guys, all of their transit buses are ADA accessible. Half of their charter buses are. And then all of the buses that go to the ADA lot are ADA capable to transport everyone. And I'm trying to think, there was something else that they explained to me, but forgot it right now.
So I kind of mentioned this as well. I'm just looking at my notes here. So we do have Metro Mobility that drops off at the fair. There's 2 different drop-off locations, one in the north and one in the south. One of the more difficult challenges that we've had with Metro Mobility in the past is that we don't have addresses for those locations. So we've worked with Metro Mobility to kind of create like drop-off spots, but there's not like a physical, like a building address. It's just part of our parking lot. We had a former employee that retired the last couple of years. He's worked for years trying to, you know, establish this as a spot where people know where to go, and so it's been established by now. So it's I know Chris can kind of speak to this as well. We get questions on that one all the time, but most of the drivers are familiar with that now that there's these multiple locations, one in the north, one in the south, where you can go catch that Metro Mobility and get that drop-off location. Like I said, one of those is mixed in with our Uber and Lyft area. It's just a dedicated part of a parking lot. We block it off so that there's no other vehicle traffic other than Uber and Lyft, and that's not very much used by Uber and Lyft. We have a separate Uber and Lyft lot in the south that's much more used. And then our other spot for Metro Mobility is Gate 9, which is also going under reconstruction this year, which is nice. We are redoing the gate itself, not the actual driving area, but the physical gate, making it wider, making it better, making it more accessible. The gate itself was old. I couldn't even guess how many years old that gate was, but old wooden gates, old turnstiles, where it would be tough to get a stroller, a wagon, a wheelchair, a scooter, something through there. And so we're upgrading that to be a much better experience because, like I said, that's where we drop off our Oscar Johnson parking ride service. That's where Metro Mobility drops off. We also drop off things like our 4-H shuttle and other places there. So it's a very important gate to us, and so that's why we're spending some money to upgrade it this year. So other than that, like I said, we could kind of talk all day. Hagen and I do a lot of our transportation stuff. It's newer to both of us. I'm sorry, I didn't really introduce ourselves. Hagen is our transportation supervisor. I'm our operations manager at the fair. I'm coming on 5 years. Hagen's coming on 1 year full-time. We've both been around a little bit longer than that seasonally, but now it's the full-time gig for both of us. So other than that, if you have questions for us, questions for Renee or Chris, feel free to let us know.
I have a few questions, and I'm seeing hands pop up already. This is a subject that we like to talk about. So the Metro Mobility, the 2 drop-off and pickup locations are the same ones from years past, I'm guessing, right? Okay, cool. And is there a possibility, like, can people get dropped off or picked up at the state fair and from other locations, or it's just those 2 spots?
We've made it to be just those 2 spots. My understanding is, so this was done again by an employee that is now retired. My understanding is it's basically those are just the 2 best locations. Otherwise, it would just kind of create a little bit of chaos trying to get them into other places. To get them, they're close to gates. They're close to gates where there are services on the inside. So like if you needed to rent a wheelchair, a wagon, a scooter, something like that, we have those services available right on the inside of those 2 gates. And you're not going very far. If you're trying to drop off somewhere else, there's just not a guarantee that you would have the amenities needed, so.
That makes sense for convenience and avoidance of congestion.
Yeah.
I'll go to Andy, because I think he might have something to add to this specific question.
Yeah, I just want to entered the tidbit that this applies to when the fair is in session. We're only going to drop at those two spots. If there's a non-fair event going on the grounds, obviously, we have more flexibility to work with the fairgrounds. But while the fair's in session, those are the two spots we're going to drop at.
Correct, I should have said that. So non-fair events, other off-season events, we work with, I don't remember the gentleman's name, you have his name, but we work with Metro Mobility to provide other locations or specific spots to drop off.
You
So
mean the state fair is not the only thing that space is used for?
believe it or not, it's not. Yeah, we have hundreds of off-season events throughout the year.
It's not brought Renee to the table.
Heidi, go ahead.
My question is that I use Google Maps, and once I put it in my phone, it was really cool because then I could pull it out and, if I'm lost in the fair and say, this is the gate I need to go to. But Google keeps doing lousy job of the picture, and I was wondering if you guys can make it more ADA so then I can have a real picture, because it's, the two options I have kind of suck, So I thought maybe you could help, and we could make it better for Google Maps, for people who want, because what I did is I labeled it so that's the gate I have to take for Metro Mobility. If that's the only, if I don't take the bus for some reason, and there's good reasons why, then if I take Metro Mobility, I have that, as my reference to help me, because I have gotten lost in trying to find it, and I'm learning. But it would help if you guys could, be on top of it, and come up with something instead of 5,000 people who go to the state fair and they have nothing to do with the stuff I need.
Thank you.
Because you can load pictures and stuff.
Can I ask a follow-up question?
Yep.
Yes.
Are you asking us to work with Google Maps so that when you put in the state fair, a photo shows up via Google that shows the gate?
Yeah, and it's gate number nine, I believe, where Metro Mobility drops off.
Yep.
And they had a really good, great, and then they changed it. And it keeps getting worse to the point where you can't tell that's gate, because then I labeled it on the bottom part to make it very clear, just so I have some reference to help me, so when I leave and come and do things. Because even if I take the bus, and I take the 3, I have reference.
So we can do a couple of things. We will definitely reach out to Google and find out what our options are there. We also, on our website, have something that we call our accessibility guide, and that's kind of our bucket for all of our accessible guest services. And what we can for sure do there is add a photo of both of the gates.
Oh,
So
that'd be cool,
independent of
too.
Google, you could go to that web page and pull up a photo of what the gate looks like there.
Anything to help Google get better, so we have options.
For sure.
Thank you.
For sure. Mhm.
Trevor.
Hi, Trevor Turner with the Minnesota Council on Disability. So Minnesota Council on Disability works the state fair, and so last year I worked every day at the state fair, and I take public transit because I'm visually impaired, and it's really convenient and nice that you're able to take a bus straight from downtown Minneapolis, where I live, to the state fair. But last year, I know that the express bus options were reduced, and so there weren't any express bus from downtown, which means it took me quite a bit to get to the state fair, but a lot of it was due to traffic, just the getting in and out of the state fair. But I was curious if there was plans to, have express buses from downtown Minneapolis, downtown St. Paul, or some sort of way to make the Route 3 faster. Because it was taking me almost an hour and a half sometimes one way to get to the fair last year.
That question right there, honestly, is up to Metro Transit.
Okay.
I have been in a couple of meetings with those guys via Zoom just here so far. I know their plan is to get more stops, more parking lot stops. They've gone down through the years. Then after COVID, obviously, when COVID hit, that kind of messed with everyone. And those guys lost a lot of drivers and everything else. And I know they're trying to up their game back. Right now, the talk is them adding in a couple more stops this year. They haven't really said yay or nay. I do know of one for sure that they're saying that they're going to do. They'll give us 4 stops, compared to what they have in the past. But right now, we're still waiting. So we're still waiting on them to kind of get back to us and let us know what those guys are capable of doing this year.
Thank you. And Trevor, we maintain an open line of contact with Metro Transit too as to what changes might be for routes to the fair. So hopefully in July, if not, we'll at least have something in writing from Metro Transit about, what the changes and new routes and same routes are gonna be. That is a good question. Patty?
Sort of following up, actually, on what a lot of people have been talking about, signage on, I admit, it's been years since I've been to the fair, so I don't profess any familiarity, but riding on Metro Mobility, I do signage, even if it's a temporary event, having some sort of place marker is extremely important. And it's, if it's not an address, something that you can guide a driver to and say, there's, just north lot or south lot or something, because that creates that can create a lot of confusion for everybody and delay things. And it's more controllable if it's recognized and addressed.
Absolutely, and I believe at this point, we do have those lots marked.
Okay.
Yep, there is some signage out there for both those drop-off, those lots.
Okay.
They have names that aren't really used anymore, but those lots are marked, so.
They are marked.
Yep.
Okay, yeah, because I know, as you say, the lack of an address
Right.
can make it helps. It really helps. Thank you.
So I have a few more questions, but I'll shoot to Doug first.
Hi, guys. Just want to ask a couple questions. So if I'm using a service like Transition Plus or Lyft accessible vehicle to get there, they would drop off at the north and south lot? Is that correct?
You said if you're using like a Lyft or rideshare type service?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, so we have two rideshare lots, again, one in the north, one in the south. The north lot is in the same spot as the Metro Mobility lot. The south rideshare lot is across from what we call Gate 7, which would be a little bit east of kind of our main parking area. But we do have two dedicated rideshare lots where you would be able to catch a ride, get dropped off, either or. We also work with both Uber and Lyft, where we put up a geo fence. So if you're like inside the fairgrounds calling for a ride, you can pick and choose which lot you want to get picked up at. So it will direct you to one of those two lots. You can say the north lot or the south lot. So like the Lyft app is very convenient to work with. Like I've never taken a Lyft from the fair, but I've used the app just to make sure it worked. And you can do that. So we do have the dedicated lots for those services. We have attendants working those lots to help people match up with their drivers and riders and things like that.
And at those lots, do they also have the rental mobility devices and things like that as well?
Just inside the north lot, they have that, we work with a company called Hometown Mobility that does our rentals. Just inside the north lot is the Hometown Mobility. Inside the south lot, you'd have to go a little bit to the west. I don't think there's one right inside it. Gate 7, but there is one inside of Gate 9, which is not too terribly far. And so that's something that we could possibly put on the accessibility page as well to advertise that, to let people know that if you do need to rent any type of mobility device to go to the north lot.
And maybe you had asked about Transition Plus, which I think is more of an alternative to Uber and Lyft. So I'm gonna put Mike on the spot here, but it's not Uber or Lyft, so could a service like Transition Plus pull up to Gate 9? To that Lyft gate?
So they could, yeah, they could. So like our taxi services will pull up to Gate 9. I'm not too familiar with Transition Plus, so we haven't like contracted with them like we have Uber and Lyft. But I'm sure they would have no problem pulling up to like Gate 9.
Andy?
Thanks.
Transportation Plus, just to clear up, is a private paid taxi. It's a taxi cab company, but it's one that contracts with Metro Mobility so that certified riders can receive an additional subsidy. So if Metro Mobility riders use the Premium on Demand program, they are receiving a ride through the private cab company, Transportation Plus. Transition Plus is is a different thing. That's a educational services program, but I think Transportation Plus is what we're talking about here.
So if they're part of Metro Mobility or related to Metro Mobility, I would assume they would have that same information and would go to gates 2 and 9 where that hometown mobility would be as well, so.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. You preempted my premium on-demand question. I appreciate that. I can cross it off my list. I have one question. I'm going to go to Heidi. So I know that Metro Transit has been utilizing a wayfinding service called IRA that is system-wide. Essentially, it's someone who's blind or low vision can load up an app, use the camera in their phone, and then be guided around by somebody via like live voice message. I'm curious if the State Fair has considered kind of like to ease that transition from transit into the fair, if y'all have considered that service at all, even if not just for the fair. They do a similar thing where they'll geofence a location, and then you can provide that service within, you know, that particular geographic area.
And I can take that question too.
Yeah.
We are aware of that service, and I understand that it's being used at the airport, I believe,
Yeah.
right?
It is.
And
Yeah. We've
Metro
been
Transit.
using it for
So we are aware of it. We haven't gotten to the point yet of being able to implement it, and I think some of the conversations we've had are to do exactly what you just mentioned, to geofence like a very small area within the fairgrounds to try it out and to target that. So I'd be interested I haven't followed up recently to find out the status of how the pilot went with Metro Transit and with the airport, but I'd love to find out more and learn from that, and then we'll see what we can do at the fairgrounds. But yes, we are aware of it. It's amazing technology.
It really is cool. I know a lot of different businesses around Minnesota use it. I think
We've been using it at the airport for
a long time.
4 years now.
Yeah.
And I mean, we were one of the first, Apple was one of the first to map our airport. And so because of that, then when IRA came in, they asked if they could do it out there, and we said sure. And luckily, I think
Is it only Apple, or
I think
is it-
we've extended their agreement. Like, I think we're on the second or third agreement at this point. So I know it probably works similar with Metro Transit. I'd like to see what they came up with.
Thank you, Darrell. Heidi, go ahead.
Okay.
Sorry.
To answer his question, is it also for Androids?
It's an
Yeah.
app that works on any smartphone.
Okay, because Apple gets a lot of, and then the Androids get lost in the picture.
I
And then
get
the
you.
other question I had is, Andy, well, they brought this up, and, because I only gone to gate number 9. If I'm coming from West St. Paul and I'm going to State Fair, could they go either gate, or would I still be going to gate number 9? Because I'm a little confused, because when I want to make my app, work for me and not against me, so I don't get lost at the State Fair. My Google Maps.
Yep. We can go to either one, but if you don't specify, we will go to 9. You can ask us to go to the other one.
Oh, okay, I didn't know how it worked, because there's 2 locations, and I thought, well, does it depend on the driver and what he thinks?
No.
Then I'll just keep gate number 9, because I'm learning it. All right, thanks.
I have yet another question. It's more clarification. I think this is the case, but so when it comes to taxi service drop-off, specifically premium on demand, which you all won't distinguish, but Metro Mobility will, those all go to either one of the 2 drop-off locations, right? You can't get dropped off anywhere in a taxi. Is
Taxi
that
service
correct?
is actually only at gate 9.
Okay.
Which
only-
we call
and
the
that's-
loop gate.
And that's north.
South side.
South. Okay.
Yep.
South. Okay.
Good thing you clarified.
Thank you very much. That is good to know. Do any other members have questions? This was quite informative. It's nice to get some fresh blood in here too. Fresh faces maybe is a better term to use. Thank you all very much for coming and joining us.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you again for having us. We
Yeah.
really appreciate it.
It's very informative.
Yeah.
I might send, or not might, I will send Christine an email. just to connect on accessibility and stuff like that in general.
We talked a lot about different gates, so we did bring some handouts, so I'll just leave them on a chair here, so grab them, you can see what we're talking about with gate 2 and gate 9.
Awesome. Yeah, stick them on there's a table right outside with some papers on it. Put it out there. That's usually where we pick up and drop off materials.
Wonderful.
Again, thank you all very much for joining us. It was informative.
Andy,
Annie's got a question? I was trying to get Doug. You want Doug?
All right, do we have, is Angela Torres in the room by chance? Oh, yes, you are, yay. Hello, hello, Angela, and I'm guessing Michael and or Jed. Perfect.
Yes.
Support in the back, wonderful.
Jed will come up in a few minutes.
All right, so you're gonna talk to us a little bit about our regional development guide for, we're going out about 20, 25 years now.
Yeah.
27 years.
We do this every 10 years.
Too.
Thank you so much for having
Yes.
us, Chair and committee members. I'm Angela Torres, the Senior Manager of Local Planning Assistance in the Community Development Division at the Council. Here today to talk a little bit about the 2050 Regional Development Guide, which establishes the policy and vision for the development of the Twin Cities region over the next 30 years.
Can you sit closer to the mic?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm very short. I will do my best. How's that?
Okay.
Is that better?
Can you move the mic any closer?
I did as close as I could.
Okay.
Is that okay? Is that better?
It sounds good, thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. So I will talk just a little bit. Is this the-
Just say, next slide.
Next slide, please.
We have
Thank
our.
you very much.
That's the magic of our remotes.
So here's a little bit of an outline of what we're going to talk about today. I will talk a little bit about the regional planning part, the planning for growth and development. My colleague, Mike Larson, will talk about the regional vision and values work that's underway. And our colleague, Jed Hanson, will join us to talk about a transportation policy plan update. And we'll hopefully have time for much discussion and next steps. Next slide, please. While it's called the 2050 Regional Development Guide, we do have a 10-year regional planning cycle, so we do this on a decennial basis. We start with whenever the census is updated, so with the 2020 census, that kicks off our work at the council to start doing analysis and work to develop the 2050 Regional Development Guide. We communicate with local governments on the changes in regional policy every 10 years, and that initiates their process to do a comprehensive plan update at the local level. Then they start implementation, we talk about the next census, and it starts all over again. Next slide, please. State statute actually requires the Metropolitan Council to develop a regional plan for the orderly and economical development of the region. Next slide, please. This statute, Statute 473145, we are very familiar with. This directs the work of the council in large part for the Regional Development Guide, talking about the orderly and economical development, both public and private, of the metropolitan area. We are tasked with considering the physical, social, and economic needs of the metropolitan area, and there are very specific areas in which we have regional system and policy plans. We have 3 systems, as you probably know, the regional transportation system, the regional park system, and a regional wastewater system. Our planning, though, encompasses more than that because the built environment is impacted by many things, so that includes land use and airports, highways, transit facilities, and others as well. Next slide, please. We do have a very ambitious path towards the 2050 regional development plans. We do a lot of policy exploration, talking about policy development. You can see that it is about a 5-year planning
Just 1 second. Yes, Heidi?
Can we shut the door?
Yeah. Oh, thank you.
We can pay attention.
Yep.
Thanks, Mike.
That's a great
Even the
suggestion.
speaker is.
That's a good suggestion, Heidi, thank you. It does
Thank you
help with
very much, I
concentration.
appreciate that. You can see we have a multi-year planning process. So as I mentioned, the decennial census kicks off the work. We get organized internally with our staff and leadership. We start talking about policy exploration, so areas of where there might be regional concern, areas of issue like climate change, for example. We started talking about those through 2022. We're working then through policy development because we have some statutory deadlines that go along with this work. The Regional Development Guide needs to be adopted by the end of 2024. And so we have been, next slide please. We have been working to create a comprehensive plan for the region. In past, we have had system and policy plans follow the development of the Regional Development Guide. We are trying to develop a unified plan at this time to try and demonstrate for local governments that the regional planning agency can do the work that they're doing as well. So we have land use policies, housing policies, regional parks, regional transportation, and waste and water resources, all working in concert on a parallel plan under a shared set of goals and objectives with the shared values and vision of the council. So next slide, please.
Just want to jump in real quickly and let you know that you have a little more time than the agenda denotes, so don't
hurry.
Yeah, I'm not saying you are hurrying, but I do know that you were via email, reaching out, and we were going back and forth. How much time do we have? We have a lot of stuff we want to. So if you want to lay it on us, by all means, you probably have about 45 or 50 minutes, not just 30 minutes.
That sounds great. Thank you so much, Chair and committee members. Any extra time is welcome, and we're happy to come back to further the conversation as well. I will defer extra time, though, to the real stars of the show, my colleague Mike Larson and Jed Hanson, who will be joining us shortly, too. So I just want to give a broad overview of engagement efforts, and the next slide goes into more specific engagement efforts. Early stage engagement, we talk with advisory committees. This is the issues exploration work that we have been doing. That's why one of the reasons that we're here today to talk about the vision and values and give an update on the transportation policy plan. We work with our local government partners on a daily basis, so we take everything that we know in our regular work and apply that to the regional planning process as well. We do have a new initiative that just concluded with a young leaders collaboration where we contracted with 5 youth-led organizations to do an intensive engagement process with them. You can move to the next slide, please. This is just to, I don't expect you to read all of this, it's a lot of words on a page, just to give a demonstration of the amount of engagement that we are planning, some of which is ongoing, some of which is very broad and encompassing of regional residents. Some new efforts, as I was mentioning with the Youth Collaborative, I'll talk about that more in the next slide, but also other initiatives like a historical cultural study that the Regional Parks group is working on. The Transportation Policy Plan team also contracted to do a lot of external engagement as well. I'm sure Jed will talk more about that. We can talk about in the next slide, please.
Just a quick tip too, you don't necessarily have to read everything on the slide, but make sure you touch on everything that's pertinent to the discussion and that you want us to know.
Right,
because not everybody may be reading the slides or have the ability to read the slides, please.
Read the slides.
There's
They're
some
kind of
folks,
blurry.
there's some folks online too.
Yep. I got you. So just to, it's an accessibility thing.
Sure.
So just to make sure, don't expect that we're going to digest everything on the slide with our eyes.
Understood. Thank you very much,
Oh,
committee
yes.
members. I appreciate that, Chair. I was trying to use the slides as a broad demonstration of the vast engagement efforts. I don't expect you to read them all, or it's not necessary to understand each of them. It is really just a broad engagement effort across the divisions, across the policy areas, and I just wanted to demonstrate that. So thank you very much for that feedback. I appreciate that. As I mentioned, we did collaborate with young leaders organizations. They recently presented that to the Committee of the Whole. On March 17th, we had an expo of sorts where they were in the lobby area talking individually about their work, but they also presented at the Committee of the Whole some of their identified issues where they were talking about affordability, transportation infrastructure, pedestrian safety was one of the key takeaways from the young leaders who often depend on walking or bicycling to move around the region. They were also talking quite intentionally about the lack of community connection in their respective communities and how they may feel welcome or included in that community and how they could see themselves in more public places with some support from local governments and regional policy. They talked quite extensively too about the parks, access and availability of transit to parks and other things too. They were seeing the outdoors as very essential to their well-being in the region, talking too about land and habitat conservation and how that fed into all of the other things, community connection, parks being essential, and water resources as well, being very important to identified issues from the youth collaboratives that we worked with. So that was a very successful engagement. We're planning on mimicking the organizational structure of that and doing additional outreach for some of the regional development guide policy planning with disadvantaged communities. So we have initiated that second effort, talking with organizations like ARC Minnesota, Twin Cities, Adaptive Cycling, We Love to Play, Metropolitan Center for Independent Living, Think Self. We've already had an engagement with Burnsville Community Education and others that we're making phone calls with to see how organizations want to be providing input on this process and others as well. So we are doing broad engagement, reaching out to a lot of communities, a lot of organizations representing disadvantaged communities, and working to contract with up to 10 more of those organizations to do another collaborative cohort of organizations, as well as doing one-on-one focused conversations as communities have capacity, community organizations have capacity to do that work. So largely, we just want to say there's a lot of engagement going on. We're happy to bring that engagement to this committee as well, and hopeful that Mike and his presentation will dig into that a little bit deeper. I'm happy to answer any questions on the broad regional planning process, but hoping to have a deeper conversation about vision and values and transportation policy plan.
Thank you for breaking for questions, because I do have one, and I see that Heidi has one too.
Sure.
I'm gonna so with the young leader, and this is a curiosity question, not a judgment question. Did disability access come up from them by any chance, or did they express interest in that at all?
Chair and committee members, thank you for that. Accessibility at large was one of the broader issues. Each organization had different specific issue identification and recommendations, and we are working together now with our research group to put that into a more readable and understandable kind of aggregation of themes and trends. That was like the big picture takeaway that you could easily get from their first initial presentations, but we're digging into that much deeper, and I assume that there were many ranges of accessibility issues, especially with parks and the safety issues.
To go a little deeper with that, there's 6 areas in the Young Leaders Initiative that they identify. Where in those 6 areas did they speak about accessibility? And like you probably touched on it, you said outside or in parks or something like that, you said, so.
Thank you, Chair and Vice Chair, committee members. Thank you for that. I appreciate that question. Digging into that a little bit deeper is something that we intend to do more of. I don't want to repeat too much what I said, but it was largely related to the outdoors and parks accessibility, but they were also talking about their positions in the world, like their workforce and job availability and other places as well.
Good.
Thank you. I'll go to Heidi and then Ken online. Go ahead, Heidi.
My question is, and this is just recently happened to me. I was in West St. Paul crossing the street, and a young gentleman wanted to learn how the lights work. And it's hard to explain how to cross the street when you have, like in the state of Minnesota, so many different types of buttons and lights and crosswalks. But I gave him the best that I could teach to him. So I don't know if in this, if you're going to be looking at updating, because if the young generation wants to be out in the community, then how do we teach the people with disabilities to be out in the community? And how do you teach crossing the street when I had to learn that there's many different kinds all over the Twin Cities? So you think one way may not work in another area, because that area in St. Paul or St. Louis Park or Minneapolis decided we can only afford this, and that's what we're going to put in. So how do you do teaching at the same time we're in the community? And the other thing is, we just got some funding and it's coming to Minnesota. Are we going to be looking at the trains too that go through our towns and work around the housings and stuff, and make sure that, because of some of the things that have been happening, the good and the bad and the ugly? So it's just something to think about, do you know?
Chair and committee members,
Yeah.
thank you so much for those insights. I don't have answers for all of this. Part of the issue exploration, this kind of feedback is what helps develop policy that can work to encourage consistency, that can work on improving accessibility across the board of many different areas. So this is the kind of feedback and questions and issues that we like to hear from
Because
you.
he was
So thank you
asking
very
really
much.
good questions, and I just said, use your, knowledge, use your brain, keep it open. Don't just rely on that system, because I might send them to something else, and then he's like, well, the lady said. And that's not always true wherever you go. So just something to think about when you redesign. Thank you.
Thank you, Heidi. Take it away, Ken.
Yeah, I just have a couple of comments that I would like to offer as suggestions, and they're just suggestions. So please just take them as such. One of the, I'm really focused in on language, and as we create policy that's going to look out 25 plus years, I want us to be sure that we're reflecting language that's inclusive and not specifically inappropriate. And one of the comments I heard that you made regarded walking and biking. And I know that you're a bit in a time crunch and want to get the point across that I'm guessing that you meant movement. But I think it's always really important, especially in policy statements and research in such that you're doing and leading, that you use inclusive language. So rolling needs to be included in that, because that specifically relates to the disability community. And without that, you're inadvertently leaving them out of the understanding of the conversation. So I would just suggest that watch the language to be sure it's inclusive and not inadvertently omitting somebody. And then there's one other thing I wanted to point out. That you use the term disadvantaged communities, and I would like to suggest that we not use disadvantaged communities, but maybe underrepresented communities.
Yeah.
There's a difference in how that's heard by different people, and I certainly don't think of myself as being disadvantaged. I'm blind, but I have other skills that I use. I'm not necessarily disadvantaged. That's my own perspective. I may be underrepresented, but I would just like to just point out those things, to be really careful and make sure that the language that's being used is really inclusive. That's my suggestion.
Chair and committee members, I just want to say thank you very much for that. We all can have learning opportunities, and I certainly appreciate that. Thank you very much.
We have a question.
Yes, Patty.
I'll follow up on what
Patty
Ken
Ann.
said. I think if we change the language, I agree with Ken wholeheartedly. I think it's not just to benefit a group of people. I think if we are conscious about language that we use, we can be more inclusive in the way that we think about and plan for various things that, as we're planning features, it's not just the not psychological, but the way that we speak to people that are included in those words. It really is beyond that. Language is very important.
Yeah, it helps people feel seen, is what it does,
Yeah.
because
Well,
historic.
Well, and if you're using the correct, this is Daryl, if you're using the correct language, it creates that understanding and that acceptance
Yes.
of what you're talking about, right? And if you don't, if you guys don't understand that language is the way that we all communicate, right? We all have different ways that we take information in, but it's about how do we understand that, and then what do we do with it?
How you
Yeah.
interpret it.
And it goes way beyond just, are we feeling included? We are included when the concerns that we have about a given, let's say rolling, I use a wheelchair, on sidewalks and at curb cut. If you start using the language, it can help you think about curb cuts as an issue. That's what's or
Yeah, that's what's pertinent to you. It's like
Right.
Heidi, her issues are pertinent to her when she talks about using her cane or having issues with the bus or having issues
thought.
at the bus stop or her thought process. I mean, those are all particular issues that are particular to our well-being and our well-being, whether we thrive or not. So if the words that you say and the words that you put down are inclusive to everybody, and we all understand it, then it makes your job a lot easier too.
It also, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to
Go ahead,
interrupt.
Patty.
Hopefully, and this is the idealist in me, it can help us understand that an individual can have multiple disabilities with multiple concerns that they have. And so we're not just, I notice a difference when I sit at the desk, if I wheel up to the desk versus sitting at the table here. There are different considerations that are different perceptions. I'll shut up.
Stereotypes, I think is the word.
Yeah, I'll shut up because
It's
I'm
okay.
blabbering on.
Hold on, one at a time, folks, one at a time here. Daryl, do you want to go?
No, I mean, I'm just taking in the conversation. We'll take that offline. So.
Okay. Did you have something you want to say, Heidi?
To her thing is, think of different cultures, because we are a mixed melting pot in Minnesota. So one group of people might see it one way and another group, but we're all coming together because we all want to do the same thing in the disability community. But so think about different cultures, and how they might interpret those words, and then figure out how you can get what you need out there, for the Hmong, the Russians, and all the different groups we have in Minnesota. So then the disability community can come together and help you.
Thank you, Heidi. I prefer the analogy of a dinner table rather than a melting pot, because melting pot assumes assimilation, which I don't think we should assume. But that's just getting into semantics. Go ahead, Diane.
Hopefully, as you talk to the Age-Friendly Council, you'll begin to understand, and I see them on your list, that all of these issues, they transcend. They transcend all age groups. So what you've identified from the young leaders, being able to then help them understand that many of the same whether it's mobility barriers or access to services or whatever, that those transcend the entire population, and that they occur at all stages from zero to death. And that all of these things, and when we can move beyond looking for accommodation, but looking for universal availability, universal being able to access everything, everybody, all the time, and then it becomes less of a making a special exception to actually building a community that meets all of our needs. I also hope that you'll kind of take a look. You're probably aware ARP did a study, it's 10 years old now, called Stuck in Place, and they looked at the larger metro area. It's bigger than what the Met Council covers, and it showed us moving more and more to outside the core center and along those arteries, that we have high concentrations of older adults with very poor access to public transportation. And so I'd be curious for you folks to be able to look and say, did this play out? Were we able to address any of this and make it so that it didn't turn into this big red splotch that they showed? And, so what are we doing right and what did we miss?
Thank you so much.
Dan just dropped a lot on you.
It doesn't happen at all here.
Right.
It does it all for us.
All right, looks like no more questions, so I think you have more presentations for us.
Mike is here to continue the conversation. Thank you so
2.0.
much.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. I'm Mike Larson. I'm a planning analyst, also in local planning assistance in the Community Development Division. Is the volume okay with my? Great. So I was appreciated listening to your comments about language and meaning, and that's I have a lot for you to react to for this part. So I will say, Mr. Chair, I did plan a few pauses. But feel free to interrupt me as the mood strikes. I will also offer that we are very interested in knowing again how you want to be engaged going forward through this process, either formally at this meeting or informally through other means of soliciting input. So I just wanted to emphasize and offer that. I have been managing the vision and values process for the 2050 regional guide, and I want to talk to you a little bit about that today. So I guess we're not using the clicker. I apologize, I may have more animation in here that's appropriate. I guess what I'll say is say next to go through the thing. So what I want to do is, this is not going to work, is it?
No.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, it's my bad. So I'll just say next when I want to, I wasn't saying it then, but So I want to share some of our definitions and what we're doing with this effort. So values are core beliefs or principles that guide our work and our expectations of people we work with, as well as the policy and program development that we're engaged. Next. Our vision is what we want to achieve for our region through our policies, practices, programs, and partnerships. Next. And lastly, goals are broadly describe the desired outcomes that we want to achieve for the region. The next slide, please. So we have engaged a lot of groups to date, and we will continue to do so. They've included the Met Council on a number of occasions, our Equity Advisory Committee, our Land Use Advisory Committee, the Metro Area Water Supply Advisory Committee, Metro Parks and Open Space Commission, the Transportation Advisory Board, the Transportation Policy Plan Advisory Work Group, which I believe you have representation on, the TPP Technical Working Group, and the Regional Planning Advisory Group. So there's no shortage. Our biggest challenge is not whether or not there are people to engage, but how to engage people efficiently, effectively, and respectfully. And again, in addition to coming to you today and our thoughts that we've shared to you about engaging folks from the community, that we would like to hear your any additional thoughts or ideas. Next, please. So when we've talked to various groups that when we try to identify our values or our core beliefs that guide our work, we frequently hear the following terms. And I've attempted to pair these. This is a presentation I've given to other groups. We hear a lot about equity, justice, cultural competence, respect, and compassion. We hear about leadership, collaboration, entrepreneurship, and innovation. We hear about accountability, transparency, and effectiveness, and stewardship, sustainability, and resilience. Now, what we've, I've really appreciated the comments you've made about the importance of language, the importance of meaning, the symbolic role that use of terms can play in signaling that we understand and you're included, we connect with you. So that's, this has been as much about that process of conversation as well as identifying what we think of the correct, terms. And I'm sure we don't have it exactly right, but again, these are not meant to be set in stone, but to foster continued conversation. So next. What we've identified is these core values that take the place of these grouping. So these what we're focusing our language around. These are the core values, and the additional terms are things that are part of our lexicon or our language when we talk to one another. That we, these are terms we can lean on and go back to make sure that we're doing our work consistent with our values. So next, please. So we've taken each of these core values and constructed them in a similar way for communication purposes, for clarification. Next. So we have a short form, and this short form is that we value the people and communities of a region. Next. We also include an acknowledgement statement. Our region is, in this particular case, our region is economic and culturally vibrant. We also recognize, however, the harm and disparities that injustices, including racism, have created. Next. And then when we end with a commitment statement related to our values, and in this case, our commitment is we are dedicated to creating systems, policies, and programs that repair and heal past harm, foster an equitable future, and eliminate disparities. Communities that have been marginalized in the past will be the center of this work and leadership roles. Then I'm going to go through the rest of this a little bit more quickly, the remaining three. So next slide, please. The next is leadership. Next. We value those in our region who inspire and motivate others for positive change. Next. Our region is known for its civic engagement. We need broad leadership to help confront the significant challenges we face around equity, climate change, safety, and other pressing issues. Next. And to maximize the potential of our region and its communities, we turn to leadership that is diverse, collaborative, culturally competent, and innovative. We encourage this kind of leadership across all sectors, including business, government, nonprofit, and education. Next slide. The third regional core value is accountability. Next. We value being effective in our work and achieving measurable outcomes. Next. Our region is known for its research initiatives and collaborations. We must be open to criticism and clearly understand when we are not achieving results or have harmed communities. Third. Sorry, you read my mind. Third. The third section is we recognize that we can maximize our effectiveness by being in partnership with others. We will also be transparent and flexible so that we can change course when we need to, or when needed. Next. And finally, stewardship. We value our region's resources. Next. Our resources include our natural, economic, and financial resources, as well as our infrastructure. We recognize that these resources may be vulnerable over time to changing conditions, including from climate change. Next. And we must design our systems and allocate our resources in ways that can be sustained over time and support the needs of future generations. Mr. Chair, so that is, before I continue, I'd offer to pause and see if you or other committee members have any questions or commentary about that language.
Doesn't look to be the case. I don't have any questions, which is rare.
All right.
So go ahead.
Very good. All right, next. So throughout our process, we had identified what we're calling cross-cutting regional issues. These are issues that cut across any various policy domains and by definition really require us to collaborate across different work areas, whether it's parks, land use, transportation, and such. So these issues form the foundation of our vision work. In the first one, not surprisingly, our region's issues related to racial disparities and other forms of inequities are front and center. Next, please. The second is public health, safety, and well-being, which has been under, climate. I guess my notes aren't in the right order here. So climate is another cross-cutting issue. Aspects include our ability to adapt to climate change, reduce or eliminate our impact on greenhouse gas emissions, and ensure that our infrastructure and natural systems are resilient over time to changing stresses. Next. So back to public health, safety, and well-being. Obviously, that our region and our country have been under stress lately. We've gone through a public health emergency with COVID, the aftermath of the killing of George Floyd and the civil unrest. And obviously, the physical and mental stresses in our communities are being felt in many ways, including in our transit system. Interestingly, we have seen a recent increase in traffic fatalities and injuries, reversing what had been a downward trend. And the fourth is natural systems, important assets to our region that might be under stress or because of development or because of climate change. And these resources may be experienced inequitably throughout the region. Ensuring that we can provide safe and reliable water for future generations is, for example, is at the heart of what Environmental Services Division does. And our regional park system is a natural resource-based system that is world-class and something that we want to preserve and expand. And I will pause there since that's a good place to pause. And I see we have a question.
Yep. Go ahead, Heidi.
I do know that you are doing some good work because you were just on the news for the farmers and the milk going in, I think it's Hastings, the water is being polluted with the milk stuff. And so the farmers don't know. So you are trying to clean up our natural water, and then flush it out. And I know that they're trying some ideas on how to clean certain lakes and see if that would work too in the Twin Cities. And that was all on the news in the last couple of days. So you guys are trying to make a difference. So maybe you can work with not just the community, but the farmers and the factories and all the different people that make it, because the legislators were talking about that, in cleaning up the environment and the chemicals and stuff. Right. So it's something you might want to take a look at.
Thank you, Heidi. I do have a question too about, I'm assuming that under equity, barriers that folks with disabilities have faced both physically and culturally fits into other inequities. But that is only an assumption. And yes, that was a question.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
I don't think that's an assumption, but I do think it's something that we will need to articulate as we go forward. We are trying to use a principle of progressive elaboration so that we can talk about things more broadly. But I think, I should probably speak more closely to the microphone. Even just the term accessibility, when we use the term access and accessibility, it can have many different meanings and many different expressions. And so that comes up a lot in committees and, could range from issues of ADA transition plan implementation to, is there housing located near jobs? Can you get there by transit? Can I walk there? Do I feel safe or included? So there's just, language is a little tricky, and I think we want to further define or articulate these things like you eloquently shared before, in a in a strategic way that helps us shape our work or prioritize our work.
Sure. Yep. Thank you very much. Sure. This is a great group, just one second. This is a great group to ask about language as it pertains to folks with disabilities too. So if you do want kind of more in-depth stuff, we can do that via email offline, or if you so desire, we can put together 2 or 3 folks that can provide input on stuff like that. Because we know that everybody can't be an expert in every single issue area, so that's why you have us. Yeah. Daryl, go ahead.
Sure. Out of the significant cross-cutting areas that I've identified, there are 4 of them. Out of those areas, the biggest one that you have is what? And the smallest one is what? So I'm thinking that your biggest numbers is in the equity part of it, and one of those is much smaller than that. But I wanted you to answer that before I did, but I already.
Mr. Chair, committee member, I'm not sure, I
Out
was,
of those 4 areas that you regionally identified, right? What are those? Which one of those areas is the biggest
issue?
you're looking at? And you're going to tell me they all have significance, right? That's why you identified them, right?
You want him to rank it, Daryl?
Yeah, I think, we've, Mr. Chair, committee member, I've been participating in lots of conversations about what we might be implying in terms of priority. Staff or policymakers that have reflect on past plans and work and wonder, are we going to have the kind of plan that helps shape priorities more clearly so that in contrast to when everything is a priority, nothing is a priority. I think that's something we want to avoid. I do think these imply priorities. They are foundational.
Right.
I'm hard pressed to say, they're meant to be interrelated. So, our climate challenges may impact certain communities.
I see that. So let's go a little further and let's go down to your regional vision. Your regional vision also is meant to work together in collaboration with the top issues that you identified. But out of those spaces, what sticks out in your mind the most?
Should we maybe go through that slide first and then
Right.
question? Is that okay?
That might work.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful.
Yeah. Do folks have questions regarding the stuff we just covered before we move on? All right. Yes, Eric, you did something.
Again, it kind of piggybacks off what you said, what I was thinking about. So I think our brainwaves are kind of aligned on that, and it's about the language on equity. But to take a step back on kind of what was presented before and what you're talking about on how these policies get formed. So you create you create values and visions, goals and objectives that help inform how these policies are written, like the land use policy, housing, parks, transportation, all those policies.
Correct.
So the values and visions that you went over again, defined our equity, leadership, accountability, and stewardship. So when let's take the transportation policy is looked at, does every policy have to meet one of these core values or multiple core values? Is there like a litmus test that we don't want to incorporate this policy in the regional development guide if it doesn't have one of these core values?
Ooh, good question.
Well, Mr. Chair, I think, so that's a very good question. How I've thought about this is that the set of core values should inform all of our work. Now, we have had conversations with the system and policy plan people, so they are always kind of coming at this from a vision. How am I going to address that and respond to that? Is that always... So there is, I think, a significant dialogue that's going on, and we will see some modifications to this. It's like, well, the federal government, we have to do this because the federal government makes us do that. And I think these are broad enough in cross-country that there's always a way to relate to the work to them. So I don't know if that helped answers your question to some degree, but
I just look at the visualization that you had used previously with, I don't even know what slide it is, but about how we have values and visions, that hierarchy of how we get down to the granular housing actions and all that stuff. And again, I said it kind of goes back to David's point about the language we're using, and it seems to me, looking at this, the only value that would address accessibility through the lens of TAAC, universal design, addressing barriers, incorporating transition plans, that kind of thing. I just want to state, it doesn't look like it's as clear under the equity portion as it could be.
Right.
And a suggestion would be just to kind of look at that, because if these are the visions, values, goals, and objectives that are informing our policies, but we're not stating accessibility as an important vision just right off the gate, or a value, I think that's something we should really look at hard.
Yeah. Mr. Chair, committee member, I do appreciate the challenge to do so. I believe that is something that we need to do and will do as part of this process, and I guess I would like to take you up on the offer to help further articulate these things in the dimensions of accessibility. Because again, I want to emphasize that some of these things require further definition because they mean many different things. So, we are trying to create a somewhat of a shared language. And I think there's some struggle and some iteration that has to occur. And sometimes people use the word values and vision. We're trying to make it as useful as possible, and it's sometimes hard not to leave out things that are important to particular stakeholder groups. And
Just as a quick follow-up, and I'm just kind of following your timeline here, because in 2022, and this is obviously the past, I'm not asking, hey, let's go back and revisit everything.
Oh, we would like to. We would like to.
That's the engagement where regional visions and values was had. And the engagement list for the groups you engaged, I just don't, I mean, maybe we do have some representation on the TAAC, the Transportation Advisory Board, but I just don't see, the TAAC or other the way we look at accessibility, those types of advocacy groups engaged in that. I think maybe that's kind of one of the areas for thought or improvement on who we're engaging. I know there's a lot of people, as you said, that can be challenging. But when it comes to equity and accessibility, there's an opportunity there when we're engaging those groups to take that into account about the values you're seeing. And does each of these groups have a stake in the values that they're trying to promote? So I just a suggestion.
Yeah.
So I think I see a few follow-ups. I'm gonna just piggyback on Eric's piggyback real quickly here, just to kind of point out. And I go back and forth on this issue, the conundrum that, once you start to list out things, if you don't list out everything, then you are leaving people out, whether it's intentionally or not. Like you said, this more sort of broad language that you're including, you call out racism, other inequities. It doesn't actually leave people out, but like we've discussed, when it's in black and white on the page, people do feel represented. But then again, if you don't list every single oppressed group out, then there is the if not intentional, but at least the perceived.
We've had this conversation.
Yeah.
Which it's a challenge. We start listing people, individuals, and then it gets scrutinized, and then we kind of lose focus.
So I know Doug had a question, but I think we might have some follow-ups. Is that the case? Heidi, Andy, and Patty? Okay, I'll go to Heidi for a follow-up to this particular.
I know, and this has been on the news and reported, we have a history of doing these kinds of things. And then we have a whole section, a group of people that get picked up and moved to a different location or changed, it's kind of like next to the airport, they took a bunch of houses out, and then they really didn't do their plan. And then they built a highway. And now I know the Black community is honoring a certain part of, I think it's St. Paul, Minneapolis, because that area was redone many years ago. So we have a history. So how do we not keep destroying, but move forward? Because I know things have to get better and things have to change, and in certain parts of the environment. But we don't just pick up a whole group of people and just relocate them. Like they don't exist, because we have a history of doing it, and including the disabled, because I'm a part of that community and I want to be a part of that community and stay where I was for many years. So it's just something to think about. I don't keep repeating the past,
Luckily for us, tearing down homes, there's the political will for tearing down homes is all but gone, I think, in the metro area.
Well, I just know that we have a history of doing certain things. And so when you put these visions together, think about the community, and if you have to do some drastic things in order to make it better, and it really is going to help the state of Minnesota. Everyone's involved. It's not just you did it, now everyone's angry.
Thank you, Heidi. Andy, did you still want to follow up?
Sure. I just wanted to follow up from a council employee perspective on one of the things that you had said, Eric, in terms of explicitly answering whether something that does not directly fit into one of these bubbles, might be done. And I think that the council has imparted the notion that rather than seeing any of these goals, including equity, as something kind of separate that we need to fit everything into, it's much more sort of a gray area where we are given the responsibility to bring a mindset and a lens that we are looking at each project and each step through each of these lenses. So we might be hard-pressed to say exactly, now this particular piece of the puzzle fits explicitly into our climate concern. But what we want to do is make sure that every step of the way we are looking at whether or not something is appropriate through an equity lens, through a climate lens, through a public health and safety and well-being lens, et cetera. And we want to make sure that none of the steps we take along the way are certainly going to create a barrier. So if we need to put in infrastructure, we want to make sure that we are putting in infrastructure in locations that will not be impediments to accessible paths of travel, that will not disproportionately excluded members of our community. So we want to look at everything we can throughout the process to make sure that each step we take, we're kind of running through automatically this internal checklist. But we might have a hard time saying, oh yeah, these new fare boxes, they're absolutely part of, natural systems lens. We might not be quite that easy.
Yeah, and if I just might clarify, I can appreciate that. I mean, not everything's going to meet every one of those aspects. I think where I was going with that is if we're looking at values as the lens in which whichever one of these bubbles is in part what we use to evaluate how our policies are being driven. As a member of this committee, I think it's extremely important to clearly indicate that one of the values is accessibility. And it does not appear, from what I'm seeing in this presentation, that that is clearly called out. So it's just one of those things that if I am someone new to the Met Council and I'm looking through at the values and I'm really trying to incorporate it, if it's not mentioned, I will not look at how these policies or decisions being made. I will be totally blind to that portion of the lens, essentially, if that was the case. And I think that's where I was going. I appreciate, looking at certain things through I think natural systems is a good example where it doesn't check that box, so we can't move on that. I totally understand that. I just think it's very important to position our values, again, as a committee member here and include it with accessibility, universal design, and all that kind of stuff. So I just wanted to make that statement, to the people in charge of, writing this and stuff, so.
Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. Patty?
One of the words that comes to my mind, and I think we've, on this committee, will say, try to add to the discussions that we have, is usability. Accessibility, in others correct me if I'm wrong, but accessibility is a baseline that says, okay, is this a specific measure that allows somebody with a disability to gain access to the whatever service or product? Let's say you take a handicap door opener. Accessibility is, is the handicap door opener there? Usability is, two things. One, does the button function? But secondly, if it doesn't function, does the system, whatever organization it is there somebody that is both known to be able to repair it or address it, both known to the people who need the malfunctioning object to work, but then also somebody that does the person, let's say I'm the person that is fixing everything. Do I know who to go to get it fixed? I may be the receiving, I may receive the criticisms or the
Complaint.
whatever, but do I know who to go to get it fixed? And are they empowered to fix it, or maybe not fix it, but address it? Does that sound to the other people like what we?
Oh, yeah.
Because
Yeah,
I
no, you're
think
right on.
we get stopped at accessibility, and it differs for each. Usability is can I use it if I have one disability? It's just another word to kind of put in the bucket to think about. There's certainly not a cut in stone definition of it.
Yeah.
But it's kind of a warning that goes up and says, okay, does this not just hit the baseline, but is it responding to changing needs?
Yep.
I think that's a good way of putting it.
No, Patty. Well, I'm drawn back to the page on values, and after this comment, we'll allow you to move on back to the page on values, where accessibility obviously makes us think of the ADA or building code, which is the bare minimum. There's no pride in saying you're going to be ADA accessible. That's the law. I assume that people obey the law. That's just what we as a large scale society. We have laws that we rely on. Usability, takes it, it's accessible, great, letter of the law met, thank you very much for not breaking the law. But now, is it usable? Like, can our folks, actually use these facilities? I think what you're talking about in terms of like, is there someone that is hearing my concern, that really draws in accountability and maybe effectiveness on that values page. I think maybe, you all are the ones who put this together, but maybe after engaging with us, you can consider the words accessibility and usability on that values page. Heidi, real quick, and I want to move on.
What she's saying, if I got this right, so it's not just putting up a push button. Yes, it pushes, but does the door open, and do what it's supposed to do? So it's two parts. And then do you have the proper people that know how to fix it in the system if it malfunctions? Because then you touch all the different areas you were talking about. Do you have your groups that know how to handle that? So we have this cool picture, in the end. So she got what she wanted, I got what I wanted, and the person down the street got what they wanted. Mm-hmm. Did that make sense?
It does, yeah. Thank you, Heidi. Continue.
Right, next slide, please. So, we've used those cross-cutting issues to develop a set of regional vision statements, and I'm sure you'll have, as I'm reading these, I think, oh, well, maybe we can work on usability. So the first one is our region is equitable, inclusive, and welcoming. And so I do want to say, again, this is evolving over time. We have had some feedback. Most of the language resonates well with people. And so when we get some, it's really interesting when specific things come up, we may need to be more explicit about accessibility. We don't, in this current set of vision statements, we don't talk about the regional economy very explicitly. So that's a thing we might see change. So this is, again, it's about creating language that creates shared meaning and also helps drive the work. So the first vision statement is, as worded today, is that our quality of life is high by national standards, but not all communities share in this. We envision a future where inequities and injustices have been eliminated, and all residents and newcomers feel welcome, included, and empowered. So, thinking about what you've just said, maybe we need to provide more detail or the further articulation of that in terms of accessibility and usability, that kind of thing. So next. The second one, related to public health, safety, and well-being, as currently constructed, it says our communities are healthy, safe, and vibrant. The well-being of our region depends on the strength and inclusiveness of our economy, as well as the quality, safety, and reliability of our public infrastructure and services. We envision a future where all of our region's residents can live healthy, productive, and rewarding lives with a sense of security and agency and well-being. And again, we do reference the economy here. We're thinking about creating a fifth vision statement that teases out the economy. And again, as we reflect on these words and think about policy development and priorities and programs and use these different lenses, well, we think, well, what does that mean? What does quality of life mean? What does it mean to feel safe? What does it mean to have a rewarding life? So some of these rhetorical questions come up. Some of them are not answerable. Some of them could be further defined and to articulate what we mean. Moving on, the next, we lead on addressing climate change. Our region leads on the critical issue of climate change. We envision a future where we have eliminated or mitigated greenhouse gas emissions and have adapted to ensure that our communities and systems are resilient. If we use our value of equity and consider the first vision statement, I think naturally what comes out of this third vision statement is that we would also ensure that vulnerable communities, that might have the most negative impacts of climate change, are addressed first and foremost. So, so the language should, I think, not necessarily resolve everything, but set the stage for a productive conversation going forward. So the fourth vision statement, next, is we protect and restore natural systems. Our region has world-class parks and abundant natural resources, and we envision a future where our natural systems are increasingly protected, integrated, and restored to ensure a high quality of life for our growing region. So again, welcome. I'll pause here to get your reaction and input. And again, I think, do want to do follow-up, to have you reflect on how this gets further articulated or modified or changed, or what comes up in general for us to consider as we move forward. I guess for a more accessible, compassionate region.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We still have one more person to speak, I'm guessing. Jed? Perfect. And it was at the end, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I have one more slide about the
do it.
development of goals, but
Do
it's really, I think at this point it's more than we need. So we'll skip that slide. Okay. We'll expect a further engagement with you, and I guess if you don't have any more comments, we'll follow up offline, and I'll turn it over to Jeff.
Sounds good. I'm sure folks have comments.
Really appreciate the conversation today.
And I'm also glad that you all did take the time.
Check online, make sure nobody had comments.
There were no hands up, I saw them. Awesome. So we got about 15 minutes. Is that acceptable?
Yes.
Yes,
My presentation should be brief. I'm mostly here to hear.
Okay.
You just say next, and then he'll help you.
Jason, there's a separate slide deck for me.
We're not doing this then.
He's doing it right now, I think.
No, he's doing Archie.
While the slides are getting pulled up, I'll introduce myself. I'm Jed Hanson, he, him. I work in the long-range planning side of Metropolitan Transportation Services. You probably more often hear from my colleagues in our operations side. Our side of MTS, we deal with planning for all modal systems in the region, so everything from roadways, transit, to aviation, bicycle and pedestrian planning. And today I'm going to cover how we are approaching an update to our long-range plan called the Transportation Policy Plan, which sets forth the vision for investment in our region's transportation system for the next 20 years. There we are. Next slide, please. We can skip over the contents. Okay. So the Transportation Policy Plan serves two purposes. It's an investment plan that directs and identifies the major projects for our regional transportation system, like highways and transitways. It also directs all federal transportation dollars, even those spent on local projects. So there may be a project that, say, the city of Minneapolis implements, if it raises to a level of regional significance or if it has federal funding involved, it needs to be a part of our plan. This plan also sets policies and guidance for local governments with how they develop their cities and interact with our transportation system and how to plan for land use that supports it. It sets specific guidance for how the regional transportation system should be implemented, so that's arterial roadways, transit ways, aviation system, et cetera. Next slide, please. Reiterating what was discussed earlier about what Michael called progressive elaboration, which I've somewhat crudely called onion layers. I like to go through these definitions just to make sure that we're on a shared understanding of each plan level. Today I'm going to talk about two major threads, goals and objectives, and policies and actions. And goals and objectives are shared with some plan specificity across our regional system plans. The goals are the broad directional statements that describe the desired end states for the region, and the objectives, they describe more measurable ways that we can achieve those results. Within the system plans, we have policies and actions. Policies, they describe our intent and how we will approach these issues, and then actions are the specific strategies or activities that will achieve those goals. And the transportation policy plan is somewhat different in that our policies and actions might not just apply to the Metropolitan Council. So while we implement transit, we also have a role in transportation systems that we do not build or own. And so a lot of these policies and actions are developed in partnership with other agencies that have responsibility for building these systems. Next slide, please. Okay, so I will briefly run through our project timeline here. This is a simplified version with less details, although I am happy to detail my very, very complex project plan if you are interested. Throughout this process, we have stakeholder engagement, and in long-range transportation planning, it is somewhat prescriptive and tends to be more focused on partner agencies. However, I will describe in a moment some more broad engagement that we have done. Throughout the course of our planning activities, we also have a number of contributing studies and plans that focus on specific issues that we need to learn more about. And those, we're always doing them, although the plans, the studies that are occurring through the end of this year are the ones that will most substantially impact our plan update. Right now, we are at a major crossroads in goals and objectives development and starting to put pen to paper on draft goals and objective statements in partnership with other system plans. And we're very much hoping to have draft statements sometime early this fall. Policies and actions, those more implementation side of things, those we actually started work on them earlier because there's a lot of work to do to inventory everything that we are already doing and identify where the gaps are in that, and then also to adjust them to respond to our new goals and objectives. So that work is expected to conclude early this winter. Finally, or next to finally, is drafting our plan chapters, which started quite some time ago, but is continuing through February of next year, and eventually reaching the point where we go through a formalized review, public comment, and adoption process. Next slide, please. So, like I mentioned, I will provide detail on two major areas here. In goals and objectives, we have just concluded a two-phased engagement project that was focused on determining what our stakeholders' priorities are within a number of potentially competing goal areas. We did this through listening sessions with the peer governments that implement the transportation system, as well as small interviews and a few broad listening sessions with nonprofit groups and organizations that were focused on advocacy, equity, climate, and neighborhood interests. Using these early findings, we held 2 online workshops and a facilitated survey to determine what the priorities amongst the themes we heard were. Next slide. And while we're still awaiting summary work that will be published later this summer, we do have some early findings to share. Safety and security was an almost universally held top priority for our stakeholders. However, there was some nuance in there. For some, this is more of an issue of injury prevention and making sure that people don't die or face life-changing injuries when they're traveling on our transportation system. But for others, it was more about personal security, both in matter of making sure that our transportation system doesn't cause harm to you itself, and also making sure that you're comfortable and you feel welcome when you're using our transportation system. Outside of this more formalized engagement, we've heard this thread through other venues as well. In our phase 1 engagement, we had a number of small interviews related to ability and aging, where the issue of sidewalk maintenance rose as a safety issue, because if sidewalks are not properly clear or if they're not in good condition, it can cause someone to face injury while traveling, even though it wasn't necessarily a crash incident. But also what rose in here was making sure that people feel safe when they're waiting for transit. I'm sure many members of the committee are familiar with having to wait an extended period of time for your ride and making sure that wherever you're waiting is a safe and secure environment. Outside of the safety issue, we also had 4 other areas that rose as pretty clear priorities, though there was a wider variety of ideas on these topics. Those were public health, climate mitigation, equity, and resilience. And then we had several other statements that had a more variable range of response and support around multimodal opportunity, modernizing our roadways, timeliness and reliability of transportation services, protecting natural systems, the economy, and regional growth. Next slide, please. So in parallel, we are developing policies and actions to implement these goals and objectives. We're taking a 3-phase approach to this work, and as I had alluded to before, those first 2 phases are mostly done because it was just more so about identifying what the current state is and where we are and where the potential gaps are. And we are just starting work to do development of new policies and reduction of policies that may be redundant or no longer a priority. As part of this work, this summer we're going to be assembling small teams of partners at implementing agencies that have technical expertise to draft and recommend policies and implementing actions. And we're going to center those groups on our eventual vision statement areas that Michael had discussed earlier. We'll present this later this fall to our technical working group for further refinement and a workshop between those to reconcile differences. Next slide, please. This graphic here is a visual description of that procedure that I just described, where we are taking that preliminary feedback, that's that first box where we are now. We will take it along with our goals and objectives draft language, reorganize our policies to fall within the goals and objectives they most closely tie to, convene the policy development teams, hold the hands-on workshops, and then arrive at draft language. Next slide. So what's next? Goals and objectives will be developed this summer along with the other system plans. And policies and actions will continue to be developed throughout the fall. And this is where there's an opportunity for further engagement with the TAAC on implementing actions and draft language. While we don't include more broad stakeholder engagement at this point, up until the public comment period in the TPP, we are always considering feedback that we receive through other groups, depending on their time and availability. And with that, I will hold for questions.
Awesome. Thank you, Jed. I don't have a question, but I do have a comment.
Yeah, I have a comment.
That I love how you seamlessly incorporated accessibility for folks with disabilities when, made ubiquitous benefits everybody, and that was in your sidewalk example. So kudos there. Daryl, comment, and then Heidi.
My comment is I'm glad to see the 2050 plan. I seen the 2020 plan, and I seen the 2040 plan. I seen the 2050 plan as well. And I'm always amazed how we talk about accessibility. We even write it down on paper. We even talk about safety and security on our trains and our transit system. We write that down on paper. But it doesn't seem to translate into real action until dollars are put towards those type of actions. So with that, I know you mentioned safety and security as being a factor of how people look at the transit system. And I know that we're going to spend an additional $2.2 million on our safety and security plan, particularly on our light rail system on the green line and the blue line, as well as some of our hot spots, we call them, in our transit system. I'm a little, I want to know, is there any talk, because I know there's been talk about it in the news, but is there any talk in the community about the fact of closing the system, as they call it, closing the system? And I know that the government had put additional dollars aside to close three of our what do you call them, stations, or close three of our stations, particularly for just as a trial run. And I'm wondering, out of that, is there, what we were told in the public was that yes, this is what the public wants, but yes, Metro Transit or Metro Council's not ready for it yet. Is that really the case, or are we still trying to figure that out? And do you hear about that through your conversations on the street?
If I could clarify, are you mentioning more secure transit station areas that may or may not have controlled fare access?
I think it goes deeper than whether or not it's just fare access. I think it goes deeper into the code of conduct and some things like that that we've strengthened due to this last transportation bill being passed and signed into law. And I'm just wondering, obviously you're going to start to hear some of those things as you talk now, but have you been hearing those things on the back end before? Now they're going to start to come out in the public, and we're going to start to hear those things.
Unfortunately, I'm not very well equipped to answer that because I don't work in capital construction. I work more so in prioritization of funding towards projects. However, I can say that from the public side, I have heard that feedback specifically. From the internal implementing side, I don't have a good answer.
Okay. Thank you.
Heidi, go ahead, Heidi.
On the news last night, Minneapolis wants to redesign how to get people to come to Minneapolis, and transportation was one of the things they talked about, maybe cutting, maybe keeping, I don't know. I just want to be able to have a broad, because I am one that cannot drive at all. I have to rely on the state of Minnesota to take care of me. So I want as many options as I can, but if Minneapolis is a dying place, it makes it hard for transportation to go certain places. So how are you working with certain counties that are having struggling problems but want to do the 2050 vision, you know what I mean? And grow and come back, because after the pandemic, that's what kind of destroyed it. But if you understand what I'm getting at.
Are you asking how are we working with cities and counties in addition to Minneapolis and St. Paul regarding their transportation needs?
Yeah, because the news last night was talking, they want to redesign, so it'd be a little bit of 2050 vision. And then they threw in transportation, so it'd be a little bit of yours in that. So how are you guys working with Minneapolis or the suburbs that are suffering? You know what I mean?
Yes, so our transportation planning process has constant and ongoing engagement with city and county governments. And part of that is we have this program called the Regional Solicitation, which is our process for allocating federal funding to our implementing partners to build and modernize their transportation system. And one of the common threads in that process is the trade-offs between serving existing communities and also serving areas of growth. And this has been a consistent topic that I don't think we're necessarily at a point where we have a shared understanding or regional agreement on the issue, but this is something that is a very strong recurring thread in our engagement, and we are very much considering it. I will also mention while I'm talking about the regional solicitation that the regional solicitation is heavily informed by the direction that we give in the transportation policy plan. So particularly with regard to issues that are of importance to this committee, now is a great time to hear that feedback so it can lead into those processes that influence transportation infrastructure in those growing communities as they develop.
So if the environment grows, then transportation will grow with it or not with it? Or does it kind of go both ways?
I would say it's a complex process for allocating the funds that take into account usage as some part of it, but also like other needs. Like we consider a variety of priorities like safety and observed safety issues and crashes, or we may consider the needs for a transit project, potential ridership changes through that. But I don't have a good answer for where it will go, but we're taking that feedback now.
Yeah, because Minneapolis was, they interview a bunch of people that live in Minneapolis, and they just want to be able to come back but not be scared, not be, frightened, but use transportation as part of getting where they need to go. Thank you.
Thank you, Heidi. What last comment, Eric? Go for it.
Sorry. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to try to muddle through this the best I can. And this kind of is, again, feeding off of Daryl's comment about if this transportation policy says it's an investment plan, right? And we're using it to prioritize our investments into the transportation network. I think was it last year, Met Council or had an ADA transition plan that was completed, isn't that correct?
Yeah.
Something like that. Through this policy, if this is the way or the mechanism to direct those funds, what or if any identified gaps in that transition plan have been prioritized through the transportation policy plan and the directing of those funds?
So the Met Council ADA transition plan primarily concerns Met Council owned and operated facilities. However, that is not the only ADA transition plan that is a matter of our planning activities. I believe there are, 70 of the cities or counties within our region. There are 189 cities and 7 counties. I believe 70 of them are required to have an ADA transition plan due to their size. And in our funding processes, we've recently adopted a policy that requires confirmation that people will adhere to maintaining new transportation funded new assets that are funded through our programs in an accessible state. We do require an ADA transition plan for a government to receive funding through our processes. As far as how our plan relates to our implemented transportation, like the transit system, I'm not the expert on that issue, but I'm taking note of that.
Thank you very much, Jed. Thank you very much, Michael, and also Angela. We do have to call it on the presentation, but we do appreciate you coming.
Yeah, this was good.
And happy to take anything offline if you want to engage with us more.
Absolutely. Thank you.
I thought this was very good.
Yeah, it was good. And thank you for using up all the time, too, that I asked you to use up.
Can we go to public comment?
Yeah, sure. I'll go to public comment first and then come back to subcommittee reports just to see if anybody from the public would like to make a comment at this time.
Thank you.
Is there anybody from the public who would like to make a comment? All right, no, perfect. Okay, subcommittee reports. Ken, do you have updates for us on the Blue Line?
Yes, we meet tonight. So from our last meeting, we did hear a pretty large concern from residents in the Broadway corridor about the alignment. Met Council has followed a really rigid process to determine alignment, involve the community at quite different levels all along the way. And now decisions have been made and the community's coming forward expressing some concerns, which kind of confuse a lot of people of us on the committee because their concerns are not really understood. So what we've heard is a lot of people are upset that the Broadway corridor has been selected as the primary route for the Blue Line extension. And they're afraid that that decision is going to take away their property because the city is and the state is going to come down and declare eminent domain to take their properties away. And that's not what's going to happen. So I don't know where the disconnect is, but that's where the community is right now. And Met Council is trying to work with the community to provide open feedback. But our meeting tonight should be really interesting. So there you go. You're up to date.
Thank you, Ken. I don't think Chris Bates is here.
No, I don't see him.
Daryl, did you have gold and purple line
Yes,
updates for us?
I have a goal line update. Goal line continues their construction activities this week. The impacts that I want to highlight are the impacts for Maplewood and Landfill and Oakdale. Highlights, the crews will be installing underground utilities there next week along Helmo Avenue south along 4th Street there, going along Oakdale Avenue, and private utility relocation work will continue in 4th Street into Oakdale. Crews will continue pouring concrete and bridge foundations consistent to bridge abutments and walls to the north side of I-94 and the east side of 694. With that, I will submit my gold line report I have, like I have in the past, if I haven't already submitted it. More importantly, I wanted to mention the purple line engagement because I know you haven't really gotten a lot of good feedback on that. And this goes to maybe Ken's point earlier in his process. Ken, you are in the beginning stages of where we were with the gold line and some other talks when we were changing, when we were looking at whether or not the site, that was the best site or the preferred transit option, or as the feds like to call it, in order to get the rating or whatever that is. But more importantly, that goes to the purple line engagement, which is the purple line engagement was the one that was supposed to go down the Bruce Ventil, the regional trail, and now they're looking at bringing it down White Bear Avenue. And but actually, all that is a study to see if bringing it down White Bear Avenue and actually making the road smaller would actually slow down the traffic and give us the opportunity to still put the bus there. But what is more important is that over the next month or so, they're asking the public to weigh in on the purple line with several engagement opportunities, and starting in St. Paul and then going all the way out and spreading all the way out to Woodbury. And there's a whole list of them starting today through the next month. So I encourage at least, if not one of you, all of you to join me somewhere along the next month to look at the Purple Line engagement process and to actually get a feel as to what BRT really looks like and what it could mean for the East Metro region, which is the area that I represent. So thank you for indulging me with that.
Thank you, Daryl. Anytime. In regards to the priority seating TAAC work group, we do plan on reinvigorating that. So if you played a part in it, look for an email in the next month or so. I'll keep my report short. As of now, we will be meeting next month. There was not an outpouring of disdain for meeting in July this year. Again, if folks are on vacation, that is fine, but we do plan on meeting the first Wednesday in July, which I think is either the 5th or the 6th.
It's the 5th.
It's the 5th, so it's right after July 4th, which falls on a Tuesday. I don't see any hands shooting up or people that are pissed off at me right now and, gonna hurt me later, so.
Chair,
yeah.
we cannot bring the legislative, we cannot bring Jed or Hannah back.
We can invite
July.
we can
So
invite
give the-
legislative folks back. Are there any member comment? I will take that as a member comment. There is, actually, I'll make my member comment. We did have a legislative update that was emailed out. Also, paper was given to you. I am not going to read through all of it. We are already 1 minute over. But that is something that you all can consume on your own time.
Right, Chair, that's great, and thank you for giving us this legislative update. I will say that the things that we talked about, Eric, the things that we talked about over the last couple of months, the code of conduct, some of those things all did get passed in the transportation bill, and it also gives us, there's one piece in the transportation bill that got passed that gives some TAAC authority to driver training and operational training with folks with physical disabilities getting on and off our buses and trains. So that should give us an opportunity to be engaging one-on-one in real time with driver operations. As well as I want to take this time to invite you guys to an event called Disability Pride Day at the Capitol, July 12th, from what I understand. And stay tuned for more details on that. It's, from what I hear, it's going to be pretty exciting. We're going to try to make Disability Pride Month a national event, and Representative Betty McCollum is leading the way on that, along with Gillette Lifetime and several other advocacy groups throughout our community.
Thank you, Daryl. Any other members have comments before we go ahead, Andy?
I was asked to bring up just a couple of things before they go to the council for ironing out. First of all, the background, I'm sure most of you know, as part of the transportation bill that passed, there will be free rides on fixed route transit on a pilot basis for Metro Mobility certified riders starting July 1st.
Do we give you our names,
As
or what
part
do we do?
of, we're going to start at least with just a flash pass, so just show your Metro Mobility ID with a valid expiration date when you get on, or your state ID with an A on it.
What if I don't have the A on my ID? I took it off particularly.
Then show your valid Metro Mobility ID.
Okay.
And then the other thing I should bring up, there will be two intercity, either reduced fare or free bus lines on a pilot basis, starting at the same time. That will also impact Metro Mobility. There will be two new fare corridors similar to the free fare corridor along Nicollet Mall. We'll see whether those are true free or just reduced. Subject matter experts are leaning free for a variety of reasons, but just know that whatever gets developed, Metro Mobility Fares will follow suit that way.
When does that occur, Andy? Because also I have another issue. When somebody has, and the go-kart is not working on the Metro Mobility bus, they typically write down your name, and then often that gets debited at a later time. But if I'm riding a mainline service bus and that bus football doesn't work, I don't get charged later for that ride. So when do we get to fix those kind of issues? Because that's consistently been an issue for the disability community, and it happens to be an issue that happens in spring and summertime quite a bit.
Yeah, a couple things there. On Fixed Route, it'll just be a flash pass to start with, so you'll just show your pass. It's not accurate to say that go-to cards are debited after the fact for Metro Mobility rides. That does
though.
not happen.
I can prove.
Let him finish, please. Go ahead, Andy.
That's it.
Oh, that's it, okay. And I think more like back and forth can happen offline.
Sure.
Given that we're already 4 minutes over. Do any other members have comments? I want to make sure that members have
Oh, I
their
do
voices
have
heard.
one really quickly. I
Yeah,
want
go
to
ahead, Diane.
thank Guthrie, because I fought in West St. Paul to get a bench, and it almost took 2 years, and they finally did, and he sent me an email, and he took a picture of it, or somebody took a picture of it, and I saw some people, in the background, so I want to thank that your voice can get heard if you keep at it for the right, and keep finding the right connection, because it was getting to the point where it was just getting lost in the system. And so Guthrie was really, and then what happened is it got sent out, and then it got lost, and then I re-talked to him, I resent it to him by text, and we got it all worked out. So pictures, so I did my part, I did my homework, so he knows what bus stop and what the problem was.
Good job,
And then
Heidi.
he went and sent it off, and he sent me an email saying, "Did you see?"
Right, great
So
job.
so I just wanted to tell you that your voice can be heard, and it's not a total broken system.
Right.
We like to hear whens. Thank you. Claudia, last
I got a question
comment.
for Andy. Andy, with these new vehicles coming through, will there be a requirement or something regarding how big a scooter or a chair can be on these vehicles?
Is that something we should take offline, probably? Member comments, not a time for questions for Metro Mobility staff. It's mainly just comments that you want to make. But if you have like specific tactical questions, we can.
I do happen to know off the top of my head, so I can answer if you want to.
If you want to answer, go ahead.
As long as a scooter or wheelchair meets what used to be the conventional wheelchair definition in the ADA, it'll fit on those buses, and our drivers are trained to help folks with that. If they are larger, what we currently have coded as an extra large chair in our system, they may not fit on those newer vehicles that you guys saw the other month, in which case they would not be assigned to those vehicles. We do have an alternate space type that can allow that.
I'm concerned because I was on a van last week, and there was a scooter there that was like, it had the trailer and the mirrors, everything on it, and the driver was to pick up another chair, but there was no room. So I'm concerned that this might be happening with these new vehicles coming in.
Yep, should be okay with the new vehicles.
Okay,
Claudia.
thank you.
Thank you, Andy. We are adjourned, and thank you all for sticking around for 7 minutes.